So I thought we could start with a story that's been in the news. So earlier this year, Bud Light partnered with trans influencer Dylan Mulvaney, and they got some backlash on social media. And then in their statement, they didn't support Dylan or mention her at all. So it's been an interesting year for that brand and for Dylan. But Dylan recently spoke at an event at Forbes, and she said that hiring a trans spokesperson isn't enough to be truly inclusive. If you're going to capitalize on us, at least have our backs. So I was curious to hear what you all thought of this story. Jack, do you want to start?
Yeah, so I came out as transgender 2 years ago, and my lived experience over the last 2 years is I've reached my 30s, I've become the happiest I ever have in my life. And when you are consistently seeing hate in the media, on social media as well, towards trans people, it's pretty brutal. We're very much in a fight at the moment that I feel like gay and lesbian people were about 20 or 30 years ago. We're seeing very similar comments happening. And actually, as a trans person in the UK, the last week has probably been the hardest and the toughest for me personally, because of comments that have been made by the government, which has completely invalidated trans people. So it has become more important than ever that brands are supporting trans people for our right to exist, to be happy, to be free, to be who we are. So I think what's happened as well with Bud Light and not supporting Dylan afterwards, off the back of that, a brand like Nike has actually given a similar opportunity and given Dylan paid work. Again, that got a lot of backlash, but as a brand, you kind of have to accept that if you're going to be part of this fight, you are going to get backlash, but it's about knowing how to deal with that backlash. That is the most important thing right now. And they did respond in an amazing way.
Yeah, I have their response here. We were talking about it backstage if you want to read it for everyone as an example.
There was a hell of a lot of really, really negative comments on social media. So as a trans person, anyone reading them, it was pretty horrific. But the way that Nike responded, to me personally, I don't think they could have responded in a more positive way. So they wrote on social media towards Dylan, "You are an essential component to the success of your community. We welcome comments that contribute to a positive and constructive discussion. Be kind, be inclusive, encourage each other. Hate speech, bullying, or other behaviours that are not in the spirit of a diverse and inclusive community will be deleted." And that was by Nike. And to me, they smashed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jen, what are your thoughts on, we were talking backstage about that meme of, when brands show support during Pride, and then the next day, when Pride Month is over, it's over.
Yeah, the notion of pink washing has been like the sort of word that has been circulating a lot, because I think it's the norm for all corporations to just basically put their logo, change into a rainbow, and call it a day. And I think I've noticed that there's a meme that I think maybe circulated this year off the back of Pride, where literally there's, corporations during Pride Week, it's all like, amped up and energy's going on. And then they're saying that the day after Pride is literally business as usual. There's nothing going on. And I think that's just a real, the fact that it's a meme, it's troubling. It's something that is just like, this is like the norm. And so I think that we have to kind of talk about how we can actually engage with the community. I'm gay myself, person of color, and obviously we want to be feeling like we belong and we have a place, and that brands actually really take the time to really get to know us. I think it's not just trying to check off your marketing budget and being like, all right, we got to target the queer community, and then that's it. That's on to the next one. It's really figuring out long-term partnerships and just kind of connections with our community on a long-term basis. It's very important.
So Natalie, as a brand leader, I know you have an example of a way that you've done this in a more long-term way. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So I think Booking.com really, as I said in the previous part of the panel, we're really there to make it easier for everyone to experience the world. And how we do that is through our technology. So we realized that a lot of LGBTQ plus travelers were finding it actually quite difficult to select a place to go because of perhaps feeling unsafe or not feeling welcome, etc. So we worked with a whole lot of hoteliers around the world to basically train them on inclusive language, train them on how to make LGBTQ plus people feel safe. And as a result, we launched our Travel Proud program, where you can actually search on Booking.com and search by Travel Proud properties. And the properties that have been certified and have been through the training will pop up. And actually, this week we hit a milestone of 50,000 properties in 120 countries, which is pretty amazing. So, and the team are just working on making sure that this is something that we do all year round. So as you were saying, we say Pride 365 because we want to be able to work with this community 365 days of the year, invest in the community, and not only put our rainbow flags up at Pride, but I do think that the Pride months, for example, in Amsterdam and Manchester, which we support, are really paramount to everything that we do as a strategy, because it helps us celebrate this wonderful community. And I think with all of the negativity happening, Pride is a really important part of celebration, so you can have positivity and good moments. So yeah, I think there's many things that the brands can do, but just on the Dylan case, I mean, I think that it's going to be a case that everyone in marketing is going to talk about for years to come of what not to do. But I think it's just like, stand by your people. You can't expect them to lean into your brand and then you don't support them. You know, you've got to really, in the Nike example, it's a really great one. Like, stand up for what you believe in and don't back down.
So if you have a question in the audience, think about that and we'll come back to that. But when we talk about, you know, Bud Light, what the kind of feedback and backlash they got on social media, maybe they're the bad example, but that kind of backlash is almost to be expected for a lot of brands and other people on social media now. So what do you think brands should keep in mind if they're responding? Like, what did you like about the Nike statement, for example, Jack?
It kind of, to me, said that, you know, we are getting hate, but no matter what, we're still standing by this person. We haven't just done this, you know, it's showing that they care, it's showing compassion. And that's so important, you know. And if people don't really understand what the lived experience of anyone in the community is, then they're not really going to care. And, you know, to see the influence from a brand and, you know, saying that they're actually still got this person's back, they're actually going to speak up, and even if they're going to get more backlash, it doesn't matter to them. What's more important is that they're sticking up for this community, and that's what's so powerful.
Yeah. Jen, what do you think? I mean, you work with brands at your agency.
Yeah, I just think that, like, we're unfortunately living in an increasingly divisive society. So the likelihood that you're going to upset someone is probably, unfortunately, likely. Like, and I think you need to just kind of think that in the back of your minds, like, oh shit, we're gonna get some backlash, but do we stand by this person regardless, thick or thin? And I think that shows true representation and accountability, but it's showing up that you're really willing to stand by them through thick and thin. And I think that's something that's really, really important. I think it's a big learning.
Yeah. Well, do you think there are times, Natalie, where a brand just shouldn't speak up at all?
Well, I think if you don't have anything that you're doing for the community, I think that then it is really pink washing or rainbow washing, because you don't have anything under the hood. You can't just say, hi, we're here, and then, you know, you don't show any support for the community throughout the year. So I think that's problematic, whether you're talking about like pink washing, green washing, every type of washing. You know, you can't support it as a brand if you don't actively support it throughout the year.
Right.
And we've seen many examples. I think, you know, at the beginning of COVID, my gosh, it feels like ages ago, but at the beginning of COVID, when there was obviously the BLM movement, there were a lot of brands that got a lot of backlash for jumping on the bandwagon and then doing nothing. You know, so I think just in general, be truth-telling.
Are there any other obvious mistakes that you think brands and social media managers are making when they try to show support for LGBTQ plus communities?
I mean, I would say, not that I've seen in person, but I would say that just always make sure that you are actually working with people in the community and don't guess. That would be a big mistake. It's best to understand what people's lived experiences are, rather than assuming. And definitely the whole rainbow, like, you know, people might have become aware, particularly this year, because there's quite a lot written about it on social media, that it's just not enough anymore. You know, it gets to the day after Pride Month, and then suddenly for 11 months you've got no evidence of support and backing anyone in the community. And, you know, after a while, like after a few years of me seeing that, it becomes more brutal, and it becomes a bit more like, actually, it really doesn't feel like they care, and it feels like the opposite effect. So that's really important to bear in mind. And this is kind of like a bit of a detour, but something that is like I'm really, really passionate about at the moment. And this isn't just about supporting people. When it comes to trans people at the moment in the UK and across the world as well, unfortunately. But there's a statistic that is actually really scary, and that is in the last 5 years, hate crime towards trans people has gone up by 186%, and a majority of that hate crime involves violence. So, and also, if you're a trans person in the UK, the chance that you're going to receive hate crime and physical violence is 41%. So this is why, you know, when physical violence is involved and when you've got the government dismissing trans people, it's terrifying because you think we're just going to see those numbers keep going up and up and up. And we're always going to exist. And now it's very much, to me, like I couldn't be sat here feeling more passionately about it because now brands actually have the opportunity to become part of the right side of history. You know, in 20, 30 years' time, hopefully we will be in much more of a place of acceptance that gay and lesbian people, even though there very much still is a fight there and why we're all sat here today. But yeah, that's the reality of it, and that's why it's so important to get it right and to have our back.
Absolutely. And Dylan Mulvaney did say that when Bud Light didn't support her, that kind of allowed that kind of online hate to proliferate on those social platforms, and we know that that can have serious repercussions.
Yeah.
Are there any questions from the audience? We have a few minutes left if anyone wants to ask a question.
There's one right at the back there.
I can't see. Back here? The mic is coming.
Can't see, it's so dark.
Over here.
Hi, thank you so much for sharing what you're going through already, kind of just living in the environment and the impact that that's having. One of the things that our team has talked about a lot has been when it comes to what are the actions you're taking for the community, kind of starting as an employer, what are you doing like within your own walls? And I'm interested if you've seen any kind of best-in-class action that employers are taking to really cultivate the right dialogue and culture within their employee community first, to kind of have the credibility and experience to then kind of engage in a larger community.
Should I take that?
Yeah, and then Jack has an interesting story as well about, but you should start.
Well, I can just comment from my last two roles, where before I was at Zalando and now at Booking, and I think obviously having your employee engagement groups are super important, but also something that we realized is that everybody is coming from such diverse different countries, etc., where something may be acceptable in one country is not acceptable where they are now. So I think one of the key things with the ERGs that we worked with both Zalando and at Booking.com is how do we encourage inclusive language and get everybody to the same page in terms of what's acceptable for our culture. So I think things like that are super important because somebody may say something offensive that they didn't realize was offensive, and then you can't really blame them for that, right? So I think the inclusive language is important, but as you were saying earlier, like having real representation from the community on these ERGs to make sure that it's very clear how they are feeling and how they're feeling supported by the company, it starts from within.
Definitely. Jack, could you share your experience at your current agency? Because I think it's really good.
Yeah. So I actually came out as trans about 2 or 3 months before I joined Cooler, and I was working freelance at the time, so I wasn't really interacting in an agency of any sort. And for me, joining a new job as a trans person for the first time was absolutely terrifying before I'd actually met anyone there. And as soon as I told them that I'm trans, I got taken under their wing completely. And they've been so unbelievably supportive of me and kind of asked me, you know, had genuine conversations of compassionately asking me, is there anything we can do to support you? I think even approaching it that way, not assuming anything again, is really important, having gentle conversations. But to me, where I work has actually been such a huge part of me finding myself and becoming way more confident and happy. And even like sitting here right now, you know, my life has changed so dramatically. And if your work support you, it's such a big part of your life. then it can actually change someone's life for the better in such an amazing way. And in all honesty, when I came out, knowing what I know about the world and how unaccepting it actually is and can be, it was one of the toughest times of my life, and I was so scared about the journey that I was about to go on. But my workplace has actually been such a key part of me, you know, being as happy as I am today. And everyone just completely accepts me for who I am. There's no questions asked. It's just, they just kind of let me live happily, like that's all I want, you know? So yeah, they've been incredible, yeah.
Amazing. Jen, do you have anything to add on that?
No, I think I've had this similar experience as you, Jack. Like just being in a place where you feel like you could just be yourself, because it's one thing to be like, oh, Jen, we know that you're gay, like we need to treat you differently, but I don't think it should be that way. Just treating people like normal people and like everybody else, I think it's something that's, you know, really, really important, but also just feeling like you're included and you belong. That sense of belonging and community is super, super important. So yeah, I think I'm also very fortunate to have that experience.
Yeah, you are. Any other questions from the audience? I can't see you very well, but if you have a question, just wave. Well, to end, oh, sorry, there's a question over here.
Do you have any advice for brands that have maybe like supported the LGBTQ plus community at times, but maybe want to make a bigger commitment or take more of an active role in supporting the community?
I guess I could take this. I mean, I've noticed and observed brands have done it, and I think it's more, what's the evolution of our strategy? I know it sounds crazy, it sounds like a marketing plan, but like examples, Absolute Vodka, they've been around for supporting the community for 40 years. And it all started with one-page ad in The Advocate, which is a LGBTQ plus publication in the States. And they were like, okay, that started then, and they've come such a long way since then. So it's more just figuring out how we can really like be adding tools and resources to the community, but also just having them be part of the conversation. So I think it's more, what can we do next? What are some other ways? The queer community is so vast, and there's so many subcultures and sub-elements of that community. It's having like, being able to kind of give back and also support them throughout the journey, I think is super, super important. And so yeah, there's different sort of strategies around that, but obviously is also timely in how we're living today. You know, obviously the anti-trans rhetoric is going on right now, then maybe there's a sort of way to really support that community in a more interesting way and a meaningful way.
And there's so many influencers now.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, brands, you know, should be working with influencers, and if you're going to do anything to support the community, make sure you're actually working with influencers and creators who are in the community, and approach them with compassion. Again, you know, don't make a huge deal out of the fact that they're, you know, they're part of the community, but supporting them, giving them paid work, incredible. That's a big way of supporting them.
Yeah. Can you shout out any influencers or creators from the community just so that our audience could go check out?
There's a trans guy called Jamie Rains. His tag is Jammy Dodger, and he's on YouTube. He's actually got over 1 million followers, and I've actually had people say to me, like when I came out, they were like, "Oh, I actually follow him." They've got nothing to do with anyone that's trans, but they're like, they find his story really interesting because he shares it so openly, and it's been amazing, like seeing his journey over the past couple of years, because he's actually getting quite a lot of paid work from brands at the moment as well. He's on Instagram and TikTok, and yeah, he's a really great one to look at. But there's so many, like as a trans person who doesn't have an influencer team, finding these people for me, I found so many myself, so they're out there. Yeah. Anyone to add, Jen?
Mine is Amber's Closet. It's an influencer, YouTuber with almost like 1 million followers now. But I must say, like, I have personal stories that like I've watched her videos help me like figure out my identity and figure out how to to come out. So go figure, Amber's Closet. But yeah, it's everything from like identity and issues, queer issues, and yeah, just having tips and some sort of like allyship around that to really help you and anybody in the community to help.
And that's actually what's so amazing, is that there's so many people from this community that are prepared to share such personal stories on social media. And I think it's so necessary for brands to support them, because it's such a brave thing to do for so many people that aren't able to speak about it. So I think, just as you say, there's so many great creators out there that are sharing incredibly personal stories that, they should be celebrated versus like, silenced, or, we were talking earlier about like all of the hate speech, which is just so unnecessary. But I don't know if you guys find, but on platforms, for example, on the the more young platforms, I'm going to say like TikTok, it seems that it's a more welcoming community space. It feels like people feel very safe to share their stories there. I don't know if you would have that same.
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. It's like people do share, and it's a really, and I agree, it's an amazing thing. It's a big part of what gave me the confidence and ability to come out myself, is seeing other people living this experience. And social media was a huge part in my journey. But people that do share this, kind of, especially if you're trans, you kind of accept there's going to be hate in the comments no matter what, especially if you've got quite a few followers as well. But it's just about overriding that. You can delete comments and they will be there, but amazingly, you know, at times I do see more positive comments than anything. And there's just one little more statistic that I think is really important, is there was a survey not long ago that surveyed the views on trans people by young people and what they think of trans people, and it was about 75% of young people in the UK who have negative beliefs and thoughts towards trans people have never actually met a trans person. And that's really important to know, because when you think about the influence social media has on people, and if people are seeing trans people on social media, that's in a way second best to meeting a trans person. So the more visible that we are, the more people are going to feel like they're meeting trans people, and then hopefully those views kind of gradually will change. And you know, trans people are always going to exist, we're always going to be here, so we're very much in a fight, but hopefully we will get there.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing your story and all of your stories, and thank you for listening.